All right, everyone, welcome back to another crossover episode. Today, we're going to be doing the same old 10 players that played for one team and another team, but of course, this is a new team here with the Chicago Blackhawks, and I'm joined by Windy City Hawkey. How you doing, my man?
Doing all right. How are you? Thanks
I'm
for
all
having
right.
me on.
Hanging in there. Yeah, no worries. Just overall, Penguins Blackhawks, kind of a rivalry, but not really. There was like a little bit of tenacity because both teams were really good at the same amount of time with the Kane and Tays and then the Crosby Malkins, but they never really met. There
Hmm.
was a stadium series in 2014. They kind of tried to push the rivalry, but there's really not been any hate there. It's just been that they've both been good, successful franchises. Did meet in the 1991 Stanley Cup final, though, so Penguins got that one. So,
Yeah.
um,
Um, the dynamic of the two teams playing at each other with basically the same level of competition until recent years, because the Hawks have fallen off and now are in a rebuild. But over the time between the Tays and Kane era, there has been a dynamic. Everyone wanted to see it. A Jonathan Tays versus Sidney Crosby face-off in a Stanley Cup final, which we never ended up coming close to seeing other than the 2013 playoffs where Pittsburgh got swept in the Eastern Conference final and the Hawks managed to went on to win their second of three cups in the decade.
we do have, at least I do, have a bunch of Stanley Cup champions on my list. And I'll start with a guy that is a Stanley Cup champion, but he's not really, well known. Not well known. He was an underrated guy on those teams. He played for the Penguins earlier on in his career, and that's Michael Rozsival. Um,
Rosie.
yeah, Rozsival was a little bit before my time when he played for the Penguins. But when he played for the Blackhawks, I obviously, knew about him. He played for the Penguins from 99 to 03. So before I started watching hockey, came to Chicago in 2012. So he is a what? He's a two-time Stanley Cup
Two-time
champion.
champion. What can't I remember? Is it the 1-year extensions that Stan Bowman would always give him for the Hawks? He was in my opinion, a good seventh defenseman when it came to when he played for the Hawks. Back when he played for Pittsburgh, the Penguins were on a very bad decline and no one was attending games. 2015, he did shatter his ankle in the game that the Hawks, I believe, swept the Wild in the second round of the playoffs. And people were actually, I hate to say it, were saying, oh, we might have just won the Stanley Cup because of the turnovers that Rozsival would give up.
All right, you're up.
My pick, I would go with Trevor Daley. Daley, he had a short stint with the Chicago Blackhawks because he was traded for Patrick Sharp from Dallas. And, well, trading a star player in Patrick Sharp for a defenseman who wasn't as liked in Chicago just because you're losing one of your star players for a player that you don't know much about.
Well, he's still there technically to this day. He has a front office position with the Penguins right now, so he's one of those guys that got traded and then retired. He did go to Detroit though. Now that I remember, that was an absolute fleecing of a trade. I'm not gonna lie. For Trevor Daley. Rob Scuderi, as much as I love him, and he's also on my list, so we'll talk about him here real quick. I had both Scuderi and Daley on my list. Scuderi was a good, solid NHL defenseman, but by the time he got traded 1-for-1 for Daley, he was not anything worth, that. Both Daley and Scuderi are Stanley Cup champions with the Penguins and the Kings in Scuderi's case. And Daley was so good in 2017 because Chris Letang went down that year, and the Penguins had to, rely on Ron Hainsey, Trevor Daley, and Justin Schultz to kind of carry that defensive corps, and he did it. And all right, so I have another Stanley Cup champion from 2009 at this time, and I knew he played for a bunch of other teams. I didn't know he stopped in Chicago. He did very briefly, 2 years, 71 games there, and that is Craig Adams. who I absolutely loved Craig Adams because he was that one player. When I was growing up and watching the Penguins, he was the one player that I identified myself as because I was not very good at hockey. So I'm like, oh, I can be a Craig Adams.
Adams worked out well for you guys, and well, just basically he was just a depth player, helped out teams and their ways and play, but that's why he was basically viewed as just a depth player for each team.
Next pick is I always try and incorporate a name that I've never heard of.
Okay.
And I look back. I'll be curious to see if I know or if you know who this is. Terry Ruskowski. I had his hockey card. I searched if he played for the Blackhawks as well. He did. He has a sick mustache, or at least had a sick mustache. Played in the 80s or the 70s and the 80s. Played for Chicago from 79 to 83. Pittsburgh for 2 years, 85 to 87. Don't really know much about him. I think he was a defenseman. Had some decent numbers, but then again, played in the 70s and the 80s, so you're going to get a lot of points.
I haven't heard of him in a long time. It's way before my time in watching hockey, and well, forgot the guy even existed. I know he existed because I've seen stuff about him, but I did not realize he played for both teams.
My next pick, you have him in the background there, is Eddie Olcyk, who played for the Penguins and also coached for the Penguins as well.
Yeah.
Not in a very good era, but still, he played for the Penguins, and I give props to anyone that played for the Penguins in that time period because they were some pretty bad teams.
Well, was a third overall pick by the Chicago Blackhawks. He's a Stanley Cup champion with the New York Rangers. He's also, when it comes to any team he played for, you think of him as a Chicago Blackhawk. He's a Chicago native, getting drafted by his hometown team, and getting to finish out his career with the Chicago Blackhawks. Now he's a broadcaster, broadcasts his national games on NBC. My next pick could be a off-the-wall one here because he's actually a very great player in NHL standards. A couple Stanley Cups to his name. He played very short stint with the Chicago Blackhawks, and that's number 77, Paul Coffey. I had to throw Coffey in this low because he didn't play as long with the Hawks. He played longer with you guys in Pittsburgh, but he was one hell of a defenseman when he was in his prime, and he was before my time, granted, but when you think of defensemen back then, you think of a Bork, you think of a Paul Coffey, and well, Paul Coffey is on my list here.
Yeah, absolutely. He's on my list. He's my number 2 pick as well. Okay. 4-time Stanley Cup champion, only one with Pittsburgh. People tend to forget that he was traded before the 92 season. So 3 with Edmonton, I believe 3 with Edmonton, and then 1 with Pittsburgh. Hall of Famer, 8-time All-Star, 3-time Norris champion. I was able to meet him in Pittsburgh 2 years ago now. Great guy. I mean, from the 30-second conversation I was able to have with him, but still, legend. He's a legend. Like, he's our first Hall of Famer on this list. All right, so my next one, only played 1 season for Pittsburgh. He's actually been on a couple of the other videos that I've done this as a crossover because he kind of bounced around a little bit, but he is probably most famous for what he did in Chicago. It's Steve Sullivan. Only played 1 year for Pittsburgh. I believe that was 2011, 2012. The only thing I remember from Steve Sullivan outside of the fact that he played for Pittsburgh was on Malkin's line for a little bit, did okay, kind of towards the end of his career. The only thing I remember from him, though, was that one instance where a fan made fun of him in the crowd about how he got hit in the face, and then that fan got hit by a puck and got like the exact same injury.
Gotta love how he was. He was a great player when he was on the Hawks. He was a leader to the team when it came to play. Steve Sullivan may have been a small guy on the ice, but he was a key member to any lineup on anyone's team.
A guy that I would probably know nothing about had it not been for the fact that he was on the Penguins back-to-back Stanley Cup champions the first time we did that in 91 and 92. Rob Brown. He played, he was one of those players that you could put with anyone that had skill and he would flourish. He was not the most skilled player in the world, Rob Brown was, but you can put him next to the centers that you had on those teams with Francis and Mullen and Trottier and a guy by the name of Mario Lemieux. Olli Maatta. I miss that guy. He had when I think of Olli Maatta, I think of honestly like kind of a tragic career, even though he's a 2-time Stanley Cup champion. But like he had cancer. He had to serve in the military. I mean, that's kind of just how things are in Finland. But he had a lot of obstacles that he had to go through. And then once he was finally healthy, looked like he could become, the next like good solid defenseman for the Penguins. Other guys came in and kind of shipped him out. Justin Schultz came in. He was kind of pushed and thrown to the wolves.
Maatta was a great player for the Hawks, but he had a rough start with them. But when he was with you guys, I thought he could be a good replacement when it comes to the future of your guys' team.
Jim Rutherford even said this. He said he was going to pick between two defensemen on who to shed, as a spare defenseman. It was Olli Maatta, and guess who the other player was that he decided to keep? Jack Johnson.
I had Dominik Kahun up next year because, man, if the Hawks were able to keep Kahun, I would have loved to have a Kahun line with Taze and Kubalik. Kahun had some memorable moments with the Hawks, and his insane facial expressions that he would make when he would score goals. It was, people were memeing it.
He's been on 4 different teams so far, and I think he's a pending RFA.
Yeah.
This is an example, in my opinion, of a player that is not getting, really enough chances because, like, he should have never been traded from Chicago. He should have never been traded from Pittsburgh. I think your number one pick, and we texted about this, is your favorite player of all time. And my number one pick is probably my favorite player of all time. So I'll let you go first with yours.
Okay. From the 2020 Hall of Fame class, 3-time Stanley Cup champion of the Chicago Blackhawks and 5-time finalist, number 81, Marian Hossa. Those accolades right there to say it, to show how good of a player he was. Granted, he did not play much with Pittsburgh. He got traded at the deadline by the Atlanta Thrashers. He came to Pittsburgh, helped the Penguins on a good run to the Cup final.
He fit in so well with Crosby.
Yeah.
It was a match made in heaven. And what did he do? He lost in the final, and he's like, all right, I'm getting out of here. And he went to the other team that they lost to, and then we beat him that next year.
Became the first player in NHL history to make it to 3 Cup finals with all different teams in a row. Marian Hossa, in my opinion, was one of those players. He may not have been viewed as the superstar of the team, but if you looked at him on the team's lineup and everything else, he was viewed as the locker room leader, the best, like one of the greatest human beings to be around for a team to have.
Yeah, I think you can understand why I don't like Marian Hossa, and I can obviously understand why you like Marian Hossa. That's your favorite player of all time, and my favorite player of all time is I'm lying if I'm saying it's not Sidney Crosby, but outside of him, Chris Kunitz is a legend. I absolutely love Chris Kunitz.
Yeah,
he's a winner. That's all I have to say. He's a 4-time Stanley Cup champion. And he competes. And my favorite thing about Kunitz is that he is not the most talented player. He's not. But he worked his ass off, had 35 goals the one year, made it to Team Canada the same year. And he was just, and he still is, in my opinion, the best line mate Crosby's ever had. Not because he was the most skilled player. We saw, Hossa, Ginla came to Pittsburgh. That didn't work out. It wasn't about skill with Crosby. It was about playing with him. Understanding how he plays, and Kunitz fit in perfectly. 3-time Stanley Cup champion with the Penguins, legend. Absolutely, he's not going to be a Hockey Hall of Famer, but he's a Pittsburgh Hall of Famer in my eyes. I absolutely love the man.
Yeah, I liked Kunitz too. When he came to Chicago, I knew it was the back end of his career. It was about ready to retire, and he ended up retiring with the Chicago Blackhawks.
So there are our picks for the top 10 players that played for both teams. But last episode that I had with I Don't Give Kachuk, he was like, well, I guess my favorite player on the Penguins currently is blank. So I'm like, all right, we'll add that on. So who is your favorite player on the Penguins? And I'll try and think. I think my answer is pretty obvious. My favorite player on the Blackhawks right now.
Probably my favorite player on the Penguins right now would be Jake Gensel. I like his style of play. I've never been a fan of Malkin. I've never been a fan of Crosby. I'm sorry for Penguin fans out there. I'm just never have been a fan of them.
I'm from about a town that is about an hour from Erie. And I was not a fan of the Blackhawks that much, especially when they were winning all the Stanley Cups. I'm like, all right, give it to someone else. And the Penguins got 2 of them after that. So, but you guys have a bunch of Erie Otters on your team. So I guess I can't even pick one. I'll pick both DeBrincat and Strome. There's one more guy I did want to mention, though, is Brandon Saad. Never played for the Penguins, but he is a Pittsburgh native.
Yeah.
Does he have all 3 with you guys?
2. He was on the 2013 and 15 rosters.
And he didn't get one this year with Colorado, man. What an upset. But, well, not an upset, but still, that kind of sucks. But anyways, thanks for joining me, man. I appreciate it. Nice meeting you.
Thanks for having me on.